Hi there. Today I'm going to talk about a book which covers the famous Iranian embassy siege. It's Go, 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 the definitive inside story of the Iranian embassy siege by Rusty Firmin, who was one of the assault team leaders, and Will Pearson, who is a writer. And as it says, it's the definitive inside story, and up till the publication of this book, there'd only really been partially told stories of the siege. And seeing as it took place, or it started around about this time, towards the end of April, it's an appropriate time to review this book. So, some of the details were released at the time. For example, straight away, the newspapers knew it was the SAS because they'd been seen on TV. But apart from that, everything else was pretty close hold. And I'd contrast that with the raid to the compound in Abbottabad to take out Osama bin Laden. I was having coffee the next day with a guy in the business, and he told me exactly which squadron of the SEAL Team 6 had performed the operation. This was the next day, and some of his colleagues had messages from the guys, and it was really well known. Whereas it took a long time for some of the details, which squadron, etc., performed the embassy siege. And so the book starts off with the 6 terrorists making their way across London, across the park, heading towards the embassy with the intention of taking over the Iranian embassy because they were from Arabistan, and they were a minority who were being oppressed at the time. Trevor Locke, who is a diplomatic protection group officer, has come on duty. He should have been off that day, but he was filling in for a colleague, rotten luck, and was having a brew inside the lobby when all hell breaks loose and the embassy is seized by the armed guys who are armed with both subguns and pistols, and they've also got grenades. So it goes out on the Met radio, and a dog handler, Dusty Gray, who had previously served in D Squadron 22 SAS, picks up the message. He's recently left the SAS and decides to phone Hereford, gets through to Mike Rose, the colonel, and gives him the heads up. Mike Rose then puts the alert process into operation, and the duty SP team, the counter-terrorist team, which was B Squadron, is alerted. Now, the way it worked was the team was broken into 2 elements, red and blue. Red were in camp training, and blue were on standby elsewhere, mainly at home. So they get the pager signal. There's still pagers. Meanwhile, Mike Rose and the officer commanding B Squadron, Hector Gullen, fly down to London. So they have actually taken the initiative themselves. So the book details what's happening inside the embassy, what's happening to the hostages and so on, what's happening to Trevor Locke. There's a couple of BBC personnel who were there applying for visas and their stories there. It all unfolds. Meanwhile, the squadron hot-foots it down to London, and Red is immediately put on the immediate action plan, and they move forward to the Royal College of Surgeons, which is adjacent to the embassy building, which within the group is called the Doctor's House. and they're on standby there, ready just to make a brutal, savage entry as best they can and do the rescue should all hell break loose. Meanwhile, blue team is in Regent's Park Barracks, and they're working on the deliberate option and starting rehearsals on that. And as the days progress, the teams swap roles, and information filters in. There are bugging devices. The security services involved in gathering information. The Met are funneling what they know in, and a picture's being built up. Particularly when one of the BBC personnel who is ill is released, and he's able to give some details of who's who inside. So on the Monday, it all goes bad, and there's a hostage is shot, killed, and his body is displayed outside. Now, the basic premise of these situations at the time was, and there had been a couple of sieges previously in London, if the terrorists or the criminals don't kill people, then we'll negotiate with them. But as soon as they start killing the hostages, it's time to use the hard option. And so the Met hand over to the SAS, and the deliberate plan, which has been modified and worked on over the days, is put into operation. So basically there are numerous entry points. There is the back door, there is the first floor balcony, and there is the second floor balcony, and then there is entry via the roof and the light well. And the idea is to swarm and get personnel inside every place where the hostages are being held, to dominate the building. Unfortunately, the timing is dislocated because one of the teams who are abseiling down to the second floor to stage there prior to making entry, one of the guys, his foot breaks the window. And what happens, he also gets hung up on the rope. A lock's head knot is thrown over his figure of 8, and he's locked on the rope. And the negotiators are talking to the terrorist leader to distract him at the time, and he is starting to panic. He's heard suspicious noises, and the negotiators trying to reassure him there's no suspicious noises. And Hector realizes that they're just going to have to go. So the plan was to plant frame charges on the back door and on the first floor balcony. They were armoured glass windows. And then the teams withdraw ready, and then there was a distraction charge up in the roof, light well, and that would initiate it. They had to blow that early before the charge placement teams had completed their task. So it started going awry. But it's the mark of guys who've really well trained is that they can adapt when a plan starts going wrong. And they maintained the momentum, kept the operation going, and rescued the hostages. A lot of close quarter fighting inside, and only one hostage was lost, and they killed 5 out of the 6 terrorists. One managed to smuggle his way out. It's seemingly that he was a young guy, and the female hostages took to him, and there was a bit of a Stockholm syndrome thing. But all the details are in the book. Who did what? Most of the names of the SAS guys are just nicknames and so on. But it's the most detailed account, and really is an inside view. The embassy is set on fire due to CS gas being fired from polecats weapons outside. They had to use guys from some of the other squadrons, because some of the B squadron guys were on other things overseas. So some of the snipers and some of the guys with the polecats were from other squadron A and D. So to make up the numbers. It's obviously the chap who was Tom, who was hung up on the abseil rope. They cut him free, dropped, continues, goes in, and kills one of the terrorists inside. After the siege, there was absolutely massive media interest in the SAS. All the newspapers the next day were full of it, and it provoked so much interest. Later on, a flood of books came out, etc. But one of the guys who was in the London territorial unit, the 2-1, told me that on their first recruiting night after the embassy siege, they had a queue out the door, and they had to bring the Ministry of Defence police in to search these guys, because guys were turning up wearing balaclavas, carrying shoulder holsters, carrying machetes and all sorts of things. Every weirdo in London descended on the Duke of York's. So the upside was that a lot of the overseas security teams and units sought out British training as a result. A lot of SAS guys were working on training gigs in the United States and so on for quite a long time after. They really were considered the world experts on the subject, and rightly so. Okay, so the book really resulted in a movie, and the movie was called 6 Days. And I personally, I don't think it's a good film. There was a lot of accuracy as regards kit. I thought the guy who played the main character didn't do a particularly good job. They made some of the officers look weak, and so some of the TV reconstructions that they've done over the years, where some of the guys have talked on TV about it and they've reconstructed it using actors and that, have been better than the movie, in my opinion. But the book really is the inside account, and I really recommend it. And the anniversary is coming up in a couple of weeks, so there'll no doubt be stuff in the media again.